Welcome to Valemount Votes. This is VCTV's series of one-on-one interviews with the candidates for mayor, for council, for regional district area H representative, and for school district 57 trustee for Robson Valley. And we're going to be talking to all the candidates today, and with me today is Nathan Smith. Welcome, Nathan.
Hi.
Great to have you here. Let's get started by having you tell us a little bit about yourself. We can get people get to know you a bit.
Well, I would think most people in Valemount are probably acquainted with me. I was born and raised in Valemount, and my mother's family has been in Valemount for many generations because my grandfather came across Canada as a surveyor for the Canadian National Railway and settled here back when this was just a subdivision on the Canadian National Railway. Yeah. So it was back before my family's been here since before Valemount was incorporated. Mm. Yeah, so I'm running in this election for council. Okay. And I'm excited to be here.
Great, great. Well, it's good to have fresh faces always vying for council. Nice to see be good to hear what you have to say about some of the issues. So we're giving the opportunity for candidates to do an opening statement. It can be up to 3 minutes. And I'm going to get you to look right into this camera lens over here whenever you're ready, and go right ahead.
Okay. I see Valemount as a place with tons of untapped potential, and I think that there are a lot of citizens with really good ideas, ideas that need to be championed to our greater governmental bodies, and I think that, you know, if we really work together, we can make Valemount into a place that is a great place to live and work.
Absolutely. You know, nobody's going to argue with you about that. That's great. Let's get right into the questions. Most of these have been submitted by our viewers, and we're going to kind of brought them into topic areas here. So the first one is on housing, and it's an important topic for a lot of people right now. We're currently experiencing a housing shortage, which is affecting home buyers, renters, seniors, basically anybody that's looking for affordable housing. Some might even call it a crisis. It's getting so bad it's very difficult to find housing. It's a serious situation that makes it difficult not only for the local people, but for people moving to Valemount, or those maybe coming here for jobs, for work, looking for it. I've heard stories about candidates for positions who come here and just can't find a place to work and have to turn down the job, and that's really difficult. Current council's done some things on housing. For example, in 2016, they struck the Housing Committee. So they have a Housing Committee that's dealing with data collection, strategic planning, funding of projects, zoning, bylaws, that type of thing. And they also, about 6 months ago, agreed in principle to set aside some village land for affordable housing project to be determined at some point in here. So they've been doing some things. So we have two questions on housing for you. And the first one is, what do you believe the role of municipal government in addressing the housing issues we have been and will continue to face? And then once you've answered that, we'll talk about your specific ideas for housing.
What's the role of municipal council in
addressing the
housing challenges that we face?
Exactly.
Well, I would say that markets have trends, and markets are always shifting. Different factors are influencing markets. I would say that looking at our current situation, one of the trends has been foreign investors investing in Canadian real estate due to the fact that their own real estate markets in their own countries are unstable, and so this leads to real estate speculation, which drives the price of real estate up, which winds up effectively stratifying the price of residential properties above what local residents can afford to compete with. So what I think that the job of municipal council is to keep an eye on these, because there's forces and factors that contribute to these trends, and if a trend starts to make our market unsustainable or cause an unsustainable bubble, then we need to we need to work to sort of buffer our market against that. I have some ideas on how to do that. But I think that's the job. The job of municipal government is to look at these trends in the markets and see what we can do when things start to get out of balance. You know, do we need to steer left or do we need to steer right?
Right. Okay. Second part of the question is, and it brings to your ideas to play here, is what do you think council should be working on over the next 4 years to deal with Valemount's housing issues? And what specific plans would you bring to the table if elected?
Okay. Well, there has been a trend in the last 20 years towards bigger houses. You know, people who are building houses lately tend to build bigger houses that you know, that the price point is up in $250,000 to $300,000 plus for a house that is beyond the needs of a small family or somebody just entering the housing market. So what I would think would be a good idea to look at would be, can we create a separate residential property class that has a limited building footprint? And can we stratify that residential property class downwards so that it is entry level, and that it is stratified so that it is limited to ownership by people who actually live and work in Valemount?
Mm-hmm. So you're talking about houses that would be, what, 600 or less square feet?
I would say 400 or less.
Tiny houses.
Yeah, well, 400 square feet is not a tiny house. A tiny house is less than 500 square feet. Right. You know, possibly even pushing down to 400 and 350 square feet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But I think that's not something to exclude as a possible avenue to look at as well. It was, could we have a tiny home mobile lot that's, you know, that is where the lots are small enough for a tiny home but not big enough for a trailer? Mm-hmm. I think that could be a burgeoning market because I don't know if there's any actual statistics on this, but I have had conversations with many people in the Lower Mainland who would move away from the Lower Mainland if they could afford to, because if you look at what the mortgage would cost you on something smaller, it would be far better than renting in Vancouver.
Right, right. I recall when I was living there, they were talking about micro condos being 200 square feet or less for $200,000, and thinking that was affordable. And in the Vancouver market, it is affordable.
Possibly, yeah, but it's yeah. I
sure,
mean,
but if you could say, you know,
yeah,
we can do it here for less than 100,000, then, you know, or less than 80,000,
yeah,
or whatever, then it
yeah,
becomes affordable.
Right. Even if we're looking at small residential properties where especially if they are stratified so that basically we're going to section off a portion of our real estate, say 25-30%, and say this is for people who live and work here. Mm-hmm. Right? Everybody else, you can do what you want with your property. I really would not like to see bylaws that limit what people can do with their property. If people want to rent their place out on Airbnb, they should be able to do that. Right. Maybe we want to address absentee landlords. Maybe, if non-residents are renting out vacation homes, maybe we should think about taxing those type of business models. If they're renting out residential properties as, operating residential properties essentially as hotels, right, then maybe we should do something to address that.
Now, you don't want to see bylaws with that regard, but how about the opposite way, that are more flexible, that allow people to put secondary homes on their larger lots?
This is another idea that was. And I've had a couple conversations with people about this. That there are many baby boomers out there who have property. They have property assets that they could, if they could somehow subdivide a piece of their property and then be able to rent to own that to somebody, or some sort of situation like that where there'd be some kind of mutually beneficial living arrangement between this elderly person and a younger person who's just entering the housing market, where that the elderly person would have somebody to maybe help them deal with snow, on their property, or
Sure.
Help them get to the grocery store or something like that, because they have this younger neighbor who can help
Right.
them out.
Right.
There's definitely some potential to explore something there.
Yeah, so lots of creative possibilities there, and that's maybe what we should be thinking of as we move forward now. It's not always about building, it's about looking what's there and seeing what you can do with what you have.
There's a line from The Way of All Life that we are helped by what is not to use what is.
Yeah, that's very true. Okay, let's move on to topic number 2. So in elections, it's always a big topic, economic development.
Right.
And or economic diversity.
Right.
So Valemount, as you know, has been growing in terms of number of homes being sold here and being built here, and new businesses opening in the community. Tourism's also been on the rise. However, there's still lots that can be done to foster further growth, particularly in the business and the industrial side as well. So we have 2 questions on economic development and diversification. The first one is, what are your ideas for stimulating economic development in Valemount? And that's kind of a big concept question, but...
What are my ideas for stimulating economic development in Valemount? Well, I would say that, for one, opening up our housing market to entry-level housing is going to possibly attract people to Valemount. There are many people out there today who can make a living from home so long as they have stable high-speed internet. So that, there is a small industry that we could attract to Valemount, because people will move here for the lifestyle provided that they can make a living. It would be good. I like the idea that the community forest is looking at starting a mill here. It would be really good to have some primary manufacturing, or secondary manufacturing come into Valemount. Again, where do we house the workers?
Right.
Right? Yeah. What was that question again?
It's just really on what you would do to
another point that that I've heard brought up before is that I see Valemount making the same mistake with tourism that we made with forestry back in the day. I mean, Valemount was founded on resource extraction, right? If it wasn't for the lumber industry, if it wasn't for people cutting down trees and making lumber, Valemount would just be, people would still be trapping furs here, because that's what my grandfather did. He was a trapper and a subsistence farmer. But most of the industry that developed Valemount was lumber and logging, and in that respect, Valemount kind of put all of its eggs in one basket, and then all that had to happen was the lumber industry faltered for a little while, and that really caused Valemount to go into a big slump for quite a while.
Right.
So I think that that it would be wise to look at diversifying our industries and economy as much as we can, trying to attract as much secondary manufacturing if we can. I mean, we have a railway here. We're on a rail line, so and a major highway, so we can ship stuff via rail. So it's definitely something to look at.
Right. So the second part of this question is on economic diversity, and you kind of covered it already in that, we had our eggs in one basket in the Canfor mill, and now we have our eggs in one basket in perhaps the tourism mill, so to speak. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's
and
what
so we need to kind of to grow that by what types of we have a lot of small businesses like the brewery and like the Swiss bakery and like places like that kind of mom and pop operations, but they employ a small number of people. Could you see more of that here?
I definitely. All it takes is can we attract the entrepreneurs that are going to pull that off? It's entrepreneurs that are going to do that, not not village council. It's people who live and work here that are going to do that stuff.
Right. When you have to dangle a carrot, what's the carrot you would dangle to those people?
What's the carrot? We have an amazing lifestyle here in Valemount. It's an incredibly safe place to live. I mean, there's cougars and bears and animals like that, but for the most part, it's an amazingly safe place to live. It's a clean place to live, other than the air quality issues that we face in the winter. It's a great place to raise a family. I grew up here. It's a great place. It's a great place to start in life. It's a great place to raise a young family. I would love to raise a family here.
So what would you do? Would you go into a major metropolis like Vancouver and kind of say, hey, go in the middle of a rush hour and hand out leaflets saying, you want to get out of this rat race? Here's where you need to be.
Possibly. Yeah. Possibly. I mean, if we could, if you could get it out there that suddenly Valemount, has, we're going to make 25% of our real estate market entry level housing that's not going to depreciate the way trailers and mobiles do. That could be an attractive thing. Mm-hmm. I think anything that we can do to attract more families to come here and live and work here is good. If we could, if it would be, we almost have the numbers of people here in Valemount again to talk to the government and say, look, we could really use to have a conservation officer here again full time, which would be one more family here, right? And just anything that we can do to attract more population to Valemount is only going to be a good thing for the economy of Valemount.
Right. Okay. Let's switch gears a little bit from those two topics and talk about air quality. So according to the BC Lung Association's 2017 State of the Air report, Valemount had the worst measured air quality in all of BC in 2016, which is the most current data available, with nearly double the provincial average objective annually for PM 2.5 emissions, exceeding the provincial baseline of 25 micrograms per cubic meter on 72 out of 365 days. So more than 2 months of the year were in excess of that. Okay. And in that year, there were no wildfire-related smoke advisories issued for the summer of 2016. Yeah. So the question for you then is, do you have a plan for addressing this important health concern of poor air quality in Valemount? And if so, can you elaborate on the actions you'd recommend to help the situation?
Yeah, this last weekend, I was reading our minister's mandate letters from our recently elected NDP government. Mm-hmm. And looking at this issue, it might be a bit of a stretch for some, but I could see this issue being framed as falling under at least 9 ministers' mandates. So what I would propose is, it wouldn't be a good idea to just heavy-handedly write a bylaw saying everybody's got to upgrade their stoves by this date or we're going to fine you, right? It doesn't seem like the right way to go. It's going to make people angry. Some people are not going to be able to afford it. It's actually the expense to upgrade a wood stove to something that's compliant with the standards. Mm-hmm. You're looking at possibly $6,000 to $10,000 depending on your house and how much stainless steel flue liner you need to put in, and a new catalytic stove is probably going to be $3,600, without paying taxes on it. So my question is, why should the homeowner bear the upfront cost for upgrading to compliance when the businesses of Valemount and the provincial health authority is going to reap the long-term benefits. I mean, there are benefits to the homeowner in that a modern catalytic stove is more efficient. I mean, I know from my own experience that your fuel consumption can drop as much as half by having a modern stove. So I think there could be a mutually beneficial situation where government, local business, and the homeowner share the cost of the upgrade and then reap this mutual benefit of the homeowner getting to the cost savings of cutting their fuel consumption in half.
Right.
But the provincial health authority is going to reap the long-term rewards of resource overburden during those months due to illness, respiratory illness from seniors and children and adults affected by respiratory illness. Local businesses are going to see possibly, I don't know how many, there is data on this, on projected how much lost time this costs our local businesses.
Health-wise, you mean?
Yeah, and lost time. Mm-hmm. You know, if you're working at the checkout counter in IGA, every time somebody opens the door, the cold air return is pulling all the air from the street into the building onto everybody who's standing in line at the checkout counter.
So all the wood smoke plus all the cars idling and
all of that
exhaust
stuff is getting pulled inside, and then you have to breathe it because what else are you going to do?
Well, there are a few things working in our favor. One of them is that the new building codes mandate, catalytic converters on stoves and that. So we're talking about an eventual time when these stoves will be gone.
Eventually, there's got to be some way to bring all the pre-existing non-complying buildings up to code.
Right.
This issue can be framed to fall under at least 9 ministers' mandates.
Right.
So, public health and safety, these older stoves build up creosote in the flues, and they're, if you're not careful with it, you can have a chimney fire. A catalytic stove, if you're burning good, clean, dry wood in it, is hardly a problem. It would also be a good idea to have a bylaw requiring those systems be inspected every 6 years, because that's when the warranty expires on your catalytic element in your catalytic stove.
Right.
So.
Okay, well, a number of things there. It's, it is people burn wood mostly for economic reasons.
Yeah.
Some people just love to burn wood, but most people do it because it's way more affordable than electricity or propane or whatever else. So it's some sort of incentive. Incentivizing the process allows them to. Mm-hmm. To do it, and maybe it's it's over. They pay half over 5 years or something, and it's an interest-free loan to upgrade or something.
Well, I see lots of mutual benefit if there's a way. I mean, I'm sure there's got to be a way to pitch this to the CBT. There's got to be a way to pitch it to the provincial government authorities, and I think everybody's going to benefit.
Of course, of course. Okay, let's move on to our fourth topic, which is on leadership, communication / openness. So being a counselor requires lots of different skills. Mm-hmm. As you can imagine, leadership at times, consensus building, effective communications, the ability to present Valemount issues to different levels of government to make sure that our voice is heard out there. Mm-hmm. And the willingness to listen and respond to the concerns of Valemount residents in an open, fair, and transparent way, right? Mm-hmm. That's important. So we have two questions on this topic, and the first one deals with the Chief Administrative Officer for the Village of Valemount. So this is a position which is basically, they used to call them city managers. They're the people that manage the operations of the entire village, in addition to all of the staff, and they're the one person who reports directly to council, the liaison for council. So it's an important position. Over the last 4 years, there have been 7 CAOs or interim CAOs in Valemount.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm sure if you're aware of that, resulting in a lot of hiring and termination costs because they have to go out and find these people and they pay them when they release them. As well as the inherent kind of instability of the operations when your chief executive leaves and you have to be replaced and brought back up to speed. So the question is, if elected as a councillor, what would you do to try to avoid the constant turnover that we have in this key administrative position for the village?
Well, I think like it is really key in leadership to work with the people that you're positioned to work with. To, you know, regardless of personality differences, most people are competent at what they're doing. So I would be committed as a councillor to work with who's ever there, as so long as they're actually doing the job. You know, it's council running for council or mayor is one of those tough jobs because it does something to you that not many people are comfortable with, in that it puts you in front of people. Not a lot of people are comfortable being in front of people and in the spotlight. So it requires a certain type of personality that's capable of handling that pressure. But at the same time, being councillor mayor requires you to be with people, which is even more challenging than being in front of people, because people have idiosyncrasies, people are challenging, people are sometimes obtuse. And that's your job as a council and mayor, is to work with the people of Valemount and to champion their ideas to the greater government bodies.
Right, right. So it's one of those situations where we have this key position. It has a tremendous amount of responsibility attached to it, and yet perhaps there's not enough care and consideration being put into the relationship between that person and the council. Right, in terms of, you know, you work for somebody and you expect it to be treated in a certain fashion, and you expect your input to be valid and valued, and you expect to be allowed to do your job. Now, I'm not saying that that's the case with any of these people, but I'm saying in any successful job, that's the number one thing. Well, maybe the wages too, but that's one and two hand in hand, right? Is that pride in the work that you do and being allowed to bring your ideas to the table too.
Yeah, that's it's hard to go to work if somebody is micromanaging your every move. You know, I've found in my own experience, you know, in construction and you know, working in aircraft maintenance, I usually find that it's best when you're managing people to leave them to their own devices as much as you can. And because this forces them to be self-reliant. I notice that whenever people start micromanaging people, it builds resentment and just causes tension, and is not an effective use of a manager's time. Right. The best managers that I've ever seen seem to hardly do anything. They spend most of their time just checking in with their people and finding out what their needs are and fixing those needs for them.
Right. So fair to say, hire the right person, then let them do their work.
Right? Yeah, exactly.
Check in when they
go with your gut, hire the right person, and let them do their job.
Right. Okay. Second question on this is about communication. So during this council's term, no formal communication policy has been developed. The town hall meetings that they had started doing for several years had stopped altogether. One of the media outlets, and it's not our station here, has had trouble getting information from the current mayor, and just in terms of a relationship. Council hasn't done anything to try to make the job of communicating with its residents, with its elected people here, with the residents any easier. For example, and here's just it's a personal thing of mine, but I like to bring it up. if you want to speak to council on a topic that's going to be on the agenda, you have to put in a request to speak as a delegate or delegation,
Right.
which is fine in writing, and you have to have that in by Thursday at 12 noon. Okay, the agenda doesn't come out until Friday afternoon, so you don't know what's actually on the agenda.
That seems underhanded.
Well, I don't know if it's underhanded or
But
just.
I'm not saying that it is underhanded, but it seems underhanded.
Seems, yeah, it doesn't seem to foster
Of course,
a good.
it's not conducive.
process.
That's not conducive to anybody being able to say, "I have something to say about what's on the docket."
Exactly. So it's just kind of one thing, and the other thing that kind of bothers me, because I'm at every council meeting for VCTV, is the public comments. They have a public comment section of every council meeting, and it's at the very end of the meeting, just before they adjourn, and they give people who want to speak 2 minutes to talk maximum, and you can speak to any item that was on the agenda that you just went through.
Right.
The problem I have with that is that if an item is being voted on, let's say somebody wants to plant a flower garden outside the village office, right?
Right.
They will vote on that earlier in the meeting without any input from the public, unless you happen to get
Right.
as a delegate earlier, or unless you happen to think of it at the meeting beforehand. So it doesn't. It's one of those other things that are. I don't know if it's intentionally done. I'm hoping not, but it's just one of those things that makes communication and makes the ability for council to get all the information they need to make decisions. Makes it a little bit more difficult. So the question I have is, if you're elected, what would you do as a councillor to improve communication between the mayor and council and Valemount residents, and also the media, because we speak for those people who aren't able to attend the meetings and come there, to provide that more open, fair, transparent process that will engage people in the process rather than deterring them from participating?
Right. I mean, if I was elected, I would hope to be as available as I could be, given the fact that I work full time, but I'm sure anybody who wants to is welcome to email me, or call me, or talk to me at the grocery store or at the brewery. I go there maybe a couple times a week after work. I'm always open to talk with people about ideas.
Right, and that's that one-on-one. What I'm kind of talking about is more the corporation of the village.
Right.
Here. Yeah.
I think, like, given what you're describing there, it's fairly obvious that something needs to be done to enable the community to actually engage with village council, with the mayor in council, because that is the formal setting of the mayor in council, that citizens need to be able to engage with that effectively. It does seem underhanded. And like you say, I don't know that it's intentional, but sometimes people in politics are more concerned with expedient means than they are with community engagement. Right. So there's obviously something that can be done to increase community engagement without making the meetings too long.
Yeah,
right.
Well, that's the trade-off.
I think that's always going to be the trade-off. Is how can we keep things on point, so that things don't drag on, and but how can people actually feel heard by village
Just
and council?
one small thing that I recall, and I don't know if they still do it, but I don't know that McBride Council had the public comments right at the top of the meeting, right after they approved the agenda and everything else.
Okay.
They go to public comments, so that if somebody's, if they're going to be debating something later in the meeting, then they've already heard what people have to say ahead of that.
That seems like a wise thing to do.
And an easy thing, right?
Yeah,
it's just, let's move this line
simple.
up here.
Very, very simple thing to do.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not like you're taking any more time than you would have given them at the end of the meeting. You're just changing the direction. But it seems like we've kind of come in Valemount in the last number of years to a downside of that communications, and so we're asking people about, what would you do? What kind of ideas would you bring to the table in terms of making it more open and making it more, people might want to participate more if they feel their voice is heard.
Oh,
right?
exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk kind of a subtopic of what we were talking about earlier, and this is about conflict of interest, and just a little bit of a backstory here. So on May the 26th of 2015, village staff presented a policy number 64 to council, which was an enhanced local conflict of interest policy for councils, as recommended by BC Solicitor General.
Right.
The Local Government Management Association of BC and the Union of BC Municipalities believe that enhanced clarification of these conflict of interest guidelines may be necessary in light of a BC Court of Appeals decision where two councillors in Salt Spring Island were found to be in conflict of interest in a case that they normally wouldn't have been, but the rules are kind of changing, and the court found that that more needs to be done, basically, to ensure that councillors stay out of conflicts of interest.
Right.
There's a community charter,
Right.
which has all of the conflicts of interest guidelines in there now.
Right.
Policy 64 was a local policy, which was stronger in terms of conflict of interest. It was adopted here by council on a 3-2 vote with
Right.
Councillor Reimer and Mayor Townsend opposing. But then 6 months later, it was rescinded by a 3-1 vote with Councillor Salt opposing. And the recommendation was that they go back to using the charter, the community charter ones.
Oh.
With no explanation given as to why that is. So the question is then, do you believe that the conflict of interest guidelines that are stronger than those contained in the community charter are necessary? And if so, would you support putting again forward that locally tailored set of guidelines for conflict of interest that are stronger?
Yeah, well, what I would say to that is that my gut feeling on that is that the charter was written at a time when things were less complex than they are now. Things in the last 20 years, I mean, in the time that I graduated, you know, when I entered high school, there was no internet here. When I finished high school, there was internet. Right. And since then, our lives have become so much more complex. So it follows that conflict of interest has become more complex as well. Right. And to just sweep that under the mat doesn't seem like a wise thing to do.
Well, the courts are kind of ruling now in ways that they didn't used to. In the old days, conflict of interest was if you made money off of something and you were on a board, you were in conflict of interest. Now it can be, even if I'm a member of a society,
yeah,
I can be found in conflict of interest because as a member, I want the society to succeed. Right. So if I'm trying to get funds and I'm involved in the vote just as a member, not as a director of the society, I could be found to be in conflict of interest according to the legal decisions that are coming out. So it's becoming,
right.
People are becoming uber sensitive to this whole area of it. And
right.
we had it in our council. I mean, they adopted it and then they threw it out.
Yeah, that's a complex question because at times you're just as an official you have to make a decision on something like that. Can you necessarily excuse yourself from voting on something, or can you acknowledge that you have a bias? I mean, in certain situations, people are going to have a bias, and frankly, it's more pleasant when people just acknowledge their bias rather than pretend that it doesn't exist. I would be more comfortable with somebody voting for something and acknowledging their bias. That doesn't seem so much as a conflict of interest to me as somebody who's, you know, who's invested in corporations that are profiting from some move that they play a key part in enabling.
Right, which is illegal.
Yes.
Totally. So, yeah, it's a complicated situation. We're just kind of curious about, you know, why it was revoked, why it was rescinded in the first place when they actually took the time to write a stronger one, adopted it, and then 6 months later they said, yeah, we're going back to the old way. It didn't seem to make any sense. So.
Well, because it's hard. Yeah, it's hard. It requires a lot of vigor to look at conflict of interest. it's not easy to
No,
acknowledge
it's
your
not.
bias.
And you know, in a small community, everybody's involved in multiple boards and multiple societies, and it's
Yeah.
very difficult. Sometimes,
Yeah.
you know, Councillor Blanchette, who was here today, I think she said she's on 10 different boards or societies, right?
Yeah.
You know, that's almost the whole town here, right?
That's going to be a reality in a small community like Valemount. There's going to be some things that could seem like a minor conflict of interest. I'm more concerned about major conflict of interest than I am with minor conflict of interests. For the most part, I'm willing to assume that most people have good intentions.
Well, you want to give people the benefit of the doubt, right?
Yeah.
Hopefully. Let's move on to a topic that is important to some people in Valemount, and that's the Rainbow Crosswalk and inclusion. Talk a little bit about that. According to Vancouver's Georgia Strait paper, as of June 11th of this year, there are now 42 Rainbow Crosswalks in BC alone here.
Right.
On July the 26th of 2016, this council voted against installing a rainbow crosswalk here, you probably remember, citing cost and safety concerns as their reason. Prince George installed one at a budgeted cost of $6,000. However, they used a cold fusion kind of plastic material that will last for many years.
Right.
Prince Rupert installed theirs for $1,850. And here there were even volunteers saying, we'll raise the money for the paint, we'll paint it for you, and we'll keep it up kind of thing.
Right.
But still the village wasn't going for it. A study conducted by the City of Edmonton with regards to safety showed that there have been no safety problems with their 6 rainbow crosswalks that they have in Edmonton. They found that the crosswalks did not decrease pedestrian safety in any way. They had no reports of accidents, etc.
Right.
Our research here at VCTV shows that Valemount is one of only 3 communities in British Columbia to have voted against rainbow crosswalks.
Right.
This one, Merritt and Campbell River being the only ones. There are some that it hasn't been brought up, but we're one of only 3.
Right.
So the question for you is, given that rainbow crosswalks are seen as a recognition that a community is considered LGBTQ2 plus friendly, if elected, would you support the installation of a rainbow crosswalk on a public street in Valemount, and why or why not?
Why or not? This is an interesting topic for me. My views have shifted somewhat on this from when it originally came up, and I don't want to. I think it's a wonderful idea to have a symbolic gesture of openness and inclusiveness in Valemount. But I question the wisdom of making symbolic gestures like that on behalf of a community if not all of our community members are open and inclusive of people living that lifestyle. I think it would be a shame to put in a crosswalk like that and have it covered up with rubber tire marks, or have some picture shows up on social media of somebody vandalizing this. Do we need a symbolic gesture to prove something that already exists, that I know to already exist in Valemount? That I know Valemount to be a welcome and open community.
Well, some people in that community feel we do, and not just as a gesture, but as a sign to perhaps younger people that there is physical evidence that viewpoint is welcomed, right? And that lifestyle is acknowledged, and so I speak neither in favor nor against it. I'm just saying that there are options.
It's a really complex and emotional topic that people feel really, really strongly about, and I've observed it being really divisive in some ways. The most wonderful thing that I thought I saw come out of that whole thing was watching some 50 to 60 people show up at a crosswalk and turn it into a rainbow crosswalk with chalk just because. That to me was a way more effective gesture on behalf of those community members who are welcoming of all people of all walks of life.
And just for those who weren't here at the time or don't know, this was not people in that community. This was people from all walks of life in the community.
Yeah,
that did that.
Yeah. So I thought that was, I thought that was a wonderful gesture on behalf of those community members who are welcoming. I don't know what the right answer is to that question. People bring up the idea of fiscal responsibility. My question would be, what would the PR exposure be for Valemount if we were to install a crosswalk and it got some press? What would the spin-off economic benefits of that be?
Right.
There's a question there. What would the economic spin-off benefits of making a statement like that be for Valemount? Would there be any?
Right.
These are all good questions to ask. I think it's a good idea to, especially on really emotional topics like this, to keep a cool head.
That's hard to do.
Yeah. Life is really hard for people when they don't feel accepted and welcome. I know this from my own personal experience, being a youth who struggled with insecurity, questioned my own sexuality in my early 20s, things like that. I wasn't always I may have always been a little bit aloof, but I didn't show up as confident as I do now in my 40s. It took me almost 20 years to become the person that I am now.
Right.
So I feel empathy for people who are struggling and feeling insecure in their position in society. And I think, anything that we can do to help people feel more secure in themselves is a good thing. But it's good to look at whether the things that we are doing are actually achieving what we, there's sometimes we have a declared intent and then a revealed intent, and sometimes those are two different things.
Right. I guess the flip side to what you were talking about is what are the optics and what message does it send that Valemount turned it down? Right?
Yeah.
I mean, certainly there are people who would agree with that position out there, but what does it say when we're not one of the 42 rainbow crosswalks in BC? We're one of the 3 that said no.
Yeah, really. And really, it's a crosswalk.
Yeah.
It's
important. It's important to that community, but it's no skin off
Yeah.
anybody else's nose, right?
If it is, I question why.
Mm-hmm. Right. Okay, well, let's move on then. Appreciate your candor on that one. Next topic is cannabis. So as you know, October 17th, recreational use of marijuana becomes legal in Canada. It could potentially have major impacts in Valemount and other communities, just because it's people can be opening retail outlets for marijuana. Right. They can be doing medicinal marijuana. They can be doing a number of things.
Right.
Municipalities across Canada are struggling with this right now. There's no clear direction for them. Some are saying, we're banning sales of it in our stores outright, and some are saying, no, we're not. We're doing it this way, and others are doing it that way. So it's a two-part question for you. So if elected, would you support and encourage entrepreneurs to start up marijuana retail outlets in the community as an economic driver?
Right.
Or would you support only sales through BC government cannabis stores, which are coming out? Or are you in favor of banning the sale of recreational marijuana in Valemount outright? Or any combination of those, I guess.
I'm in favor of letting people do what they will, so long as they're not harming others. we need to consider public safety, and we need to consider the impact on the community. We need to consider the economic benefit. I'm not sure what the answer is. That's another complex. It's another complex issue, and there hasn't been very much directive from provincial and federal authorities and as to how to implement this yet. So.
And trickling down to the municipalities, who are the ones who actually have to deal with it. Right?
Yeah, exactly. So it's one of these things. It's one of these things where, you know, somebody's made this campaign promise, and now they're making a show of following through on that. But it's sort of, I'm not sure how it's all going to pan out, and we still haven't seen it pan out yet.
Right. And that will be probably Valemount Council's one of their very first things with the new council.
We're going to have to address it, and I don't know what the right thing is to do there. Right. But I'm always, my thought is that somewhere out there in the world, somebody has modeled a solution to this that is working in a location, and if our location, the factors match, you know, we should maybe look at what other people are doing, look at what other people are doing and what is working elsewhere, and then see if that matches our situation here.
Well, I mean, Washington State, Oregon, California, Colorado, there are several close to home here.
Yeah, and it generates massive amounts of tax revenue.
That's why I said it could have major
benefits
right?
for our economy, and you could use that tax revenue to address all kinds of stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the first half of that question. The second half deals with what do you believe should be the laws on cannabis growing in Valemount?
What should be the laws on cannabis growing in Valemount? Well, I think you definitely don't want people moving into residential houses and putting up plastic in the basement and
the grow-up scenario,
and you know, pumping that house full of moisture. That's, you know, from my experience in residential construction, is not a good idea. To set something like that up in a house without proper ventilation, you set up black mold and all kinds of problems. So, you know, if it's going to be done as an industry in Valemount, then it needs to be done on industrial land, or in the appropriately rated buildings. You know, things need to be done to spec. And if people are growing this stuff for recreational consumption, you know, there needs to be quality control measures in place.
Yeah, that's I believe the regulation says 4 plants for personal use can be grown. People are saying, well, perhaps there will be problems with, you know, your neighbor is growing pot, and there's an inherent smell about growing pot, and it's wafting through my window next door, kind of thing, or perhaps, like you say, they're using too much electricity, or doing something other that's unsafe.
It is, you know, it's the lights that are used to grow that stuff nowadays are LED, and not the high power units that, you know, the metal halide type lights that people used to use that use a lot of power. I don't know that if somebody's got 4 plants at their residence that you're even going to notice it. I mean, do people complain about the lilacs when they're blooming?
It's a whole new game here. I don't know.
I don't know. I don't know that the smell of marijuana growing is that unpleasant. I don't see a person growing plants in their, you know, people are already doing that in their own homes as we speak, for their own use. Just because, you know, the RCMP don't have time to deal with that. Right. Again, you know, so long as people aren't harming other people, I see no reason let them do what they will.
Okay, fair enough. The last question we have submitted by the viewers deals with traffic, as they've written, traffic congestion and parking issues.
Right.
The question is, what are your thoughts regarding the traffic congestion and parking issues on Caras Drive? And I'm thinking they're around the Petro-Canada and the Tim Hortons there, and also the Main Street business area around the hotel and around the Swiss Bakery, where people are kind of parking half on the highway or half on Main Street and half on the boulevard. And what do you feel needs to be done or could be done to improve the situations in both those areas?
Well, I know currently Valemount has a bylaw requiring all businesses to establish adequate parking for their business.
For their staff? Yeah.
For their, for their
and their business as well.
For their business as well. So, I mean, in the winter when there are big trucks with 30-foot trailers full of sleds behind them, parked out into the street, parked on the street, or taking up all the parking lots in front of the IGA just because they didn't feel like walking down the street to go to the IGA and pick up a six-pack of beer. I think that with the issues that we're facing, especially in the winter around that, one thing that we could look at is ticketing. How long are you allowed to park a semi on Caras Drive in the winter there while you sleep? Or should there be a place where truck drivers like that can park where they're not congesting that that intersection, right. Blocking traffic and causing all kinds of congestion, just so that they don't have to walk too far to go to Tim Hortons. For a while there, after the new Esso opened up, trucks were actually pulling into the Esso parking lot to get a coffee. So I think that the way to deal with that is bylaw enforcement. It's plain and simple. Right. People aren't going to like it, but really,
that's what you need to do. Okay, that's the last of the questions that people have submitted. We have one question that's for you specifically, and that is, you haven't been involved in local politics before. What made you decide to run for office at this time, and what do you feel that you can bring to the table as a councillor?
Okay. What made me decide, I went to high school with Owen Torgerson, who is currently a member of council, and for the past 6 months, he's encouraged me he encouraged me to run, and him encouraging me to run caused me to think seriously about it, and after talking with some people about the idea, as much as it's a daunting proposition, I think that just throwing my hat into the ring and participating in this process is bringing aspects of myself out of me that I possibly wouldn't have uncovered otherwise. I have a talent for language, I have a talent for writing, and I have enough charisma to possibly be good at the job. And I'm always interested in trying something new if it's going to foster my own personal growth and development.
Great. Okay, and that is the last of the questions. I thank you very much for answering them all. And as we did at the beginning, now we have up to 3 minutes for you to make a closing statement of whatever you want to say. And again, just look right into that camera, and whenever you're ready, just go for it.
Okay. So I don't know if I have that much more to say. I've thrown my hat in the ring, and you all are going to have to make a choice. And I'm committed to doing the best possible job that I can do if elected. And I am eternally grateful to Valemount for everything that I am today. I don't know how I could be what I am today without Valemount. Thank you.
Very well said. Thank you very much. So I'm just going to take a second here now to encourage people to get out and vote. It's a right that we have, it's a privilege that we have, and you want to get out there and exercise your democratic rights and get out there and make a difference. You know, in a small community like this, especially with a number of people running, 1 or 2 votes can make a big difference. So
Yeah.
don't think that your vote doesn't count. It surely does. So a little bit of information. So advance voting for mayor and council will be on Wednesday, October the 10th. From 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. and that will be held at the village office downstairs in the council chambers. So from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. on October the 10th, that's at 735 Cranberry Lake Road. A general voting day is Saturday, October the 20th, and the same hours from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. And voting there will be at the Valemount Community Hall, which is next door to us here at 101 Gore Street. So that's all we got. Thank you very much, Nathan.
Thank you, Gordon.
Appreciate you being here.
Michael, sorry.
No problem. And thank you very much for watching, and make sure you get out and vote.